Good afternoon. We're bringing today's budget hearing for EED to order. And so this is a big day. This is when we do our higher education overview, and we'll be beginning with our analyst, Kelly Norton.
And whoever hit the button. We're going to begin on page 2, which looks at state funding changes for higher education. The public four-year institutions funding increases by 1.8%. So let's see if this works. Great. Okay. The public four-year institutions funding increases by 1.8% or $42.9 million from fiscal 25 to 26. Other higher education increases by 0.5% or $4.3 million. This results in a total increase of 1.5% or $47.2 million for total higher education as shown in the bottom row. A more detailed summary of these budget changes will be discussed in their respective agency and institutional budget analyses. Turning to page 5, Exhibit 1 shows state support for the public four-year institutions. When excluding agricultural research and extension funding at Eastern Shore and College Park, total funding increases $42.8 million. St. Mary's College of Maryland receives the largest percentage increase, 5.7%, or an increase of $2.2 million. The primary driver of these increases are the salary enhancements. When the salary enhancements are accounted for, St. Mary's funding only increases 1.7%, and USM institutions state support decreases approximately 5%. Without salary enhancements and HBCU settlement funding, Morgan State's state support decreases 5% as well. Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows changes in state and local funding per FTEs from fiscal 2013 compared to fiscal 2023. Nationally, state and local spending per FTEs increased 39%. Maryland's increase of 57% falls below 3 competitor states, Washington, California, and Massachusetts. We now move on to Maryland's state funding by segments. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows funding per FTEs at the Maryland two-year institutions. From 2020 to 2023, state funding increased by 9.1% and local funding decreased by 2.2%. This increase in state per FTEs is mostly due to declining enrollment at the Maryland two-year public institutions during this period. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows state support and net tuition revenue per FTEs for the Maryland public four-year institutions. From 2020 to 2023, state support increased by 11.9%, while net tuition decreased 10.8%. Turning to Exhibit 5 on page 9, this exhibit compares the 5-year percentage change in tuition and fees at Maryland's public institutions with our competitor states after adjusting for inflation. In terms of the two-year institutions, nationally there was a decrease of 9.6%, and Maryland experienced a 14.5% decrease. Tuition and fees decreased 10.4% at Maryland's four-year public institutions, and the U.S. average decreased 10.7%. Exhibits 6 and 7 on pages 10 and 11 show the average in-state and out-of-state tuition and fees for Maryland and its competitor states. Maryland has the third least expensive rates for both categories, and an average of $11,160 for the 2024 through 2025 academic year. Maryland has the 27th most expensive in-state tuition rate in the country. Turning to page 12, Exhibit 8 is a table showing the in-state tuition for University of College Park and its peer institutions such as UCLA and The Ohio State University. College Park has the second lowest tuition and fees among this group of institutions. Exhibit 9 on page 13 shows total undergraduate enrollment changes by segment. Nationally, undergraduate enrollment increased 3% in fall 2024. Similarly, Maryland's total undergraduate enrollment increased by 3.6%. Enrollment increased across all segments as shown in Exhibit 9. Community college enrollment grew by 4.6%, and the public 4 years enrollment increased by 3.4%. The private independent institutions enrollment increased 1%, the first increase since fall 2019. It should be noted that the fall 2024 enrollment numbers reflect opening fall enrollment data and are subject to revision. And Sarah Baker will now provide an update on the progress towards 55% degree attainment.
Okay, Exhibit 10 on page 14 shows Maryland's progress towards its 55% completion goal, in which at least 55% of adults will hold at least one degree credential by this year. When including the short-term credentials, 58.4% of Marylanders hold at least one credential. However, when excluding those credentials, only 52.7% have a credential. Now, MHEC did develop a model that sets degree targets that institutions need to reach in order for the state to reach its completion goal. MHEC projects Maryland will need about 845,000 additional degree holders this year, with Maryland's institution accounting for over 600,000 of these additional degree holders. Exhibit 11 on page 15 shows each segment's target and actual degrees conferred. The public four-year institutions consistently exceeded their targets, and so did the community colleges till 2023 when they fell short by over 898 degrees. MHEC projects the state will fall short of its goal, projecting a degree attainment rate of 52.4% this year. So Maryland will need to improve student progression from high school through completion in order to maintain and increase its degree attainment level. As shown on Exhibit 12 on page 16, the number of high school students is projected to peak in 2026 and then decline 6.9% by 2035. In addition, as shown on Exhibit 13 on page 17, Maryland graduates will become more diverse, with the share of non-white graduates projected to increase from 61.5% in 22 to 72.2% in 35. So in order to maintain and grow enrollment, institutions will need to develop pathways or programs to retain and graduate first generation and or low-income students. In looking at the national immediate college enrollment outcomes on page 18, as you can see on Exhibit 14, there's a gap in enrollment and outcomes between graduates from low-income and high-minority schools and those from high-income, low-minority schools. Overall, less than a third of low-income students will earn a degree. And looking at Maryland on Exhibit 15 on page 19, this shows that the percentage of high school graduates not enrolling in college increased to 53% with the class of 2020, reflecting the impact of COVID had on decisions, students' decisions to enroll in college. Since the pandemic, those going to college has increased to over 50%, but is still below the pre-pandemic levels. While undergraduate enrollment has increased since pandemic, many of these students will eventually disengage from post-secondary education before earning a degree. Re-engaging this population of students will not only help the state meet its attainment goal, but also be a source of enrollment growth for institutions. Nationally, those with some college and no credentials increased 2% to 36.8 million. And as shown on Exhibit 16 on page 20, 6.2% had recently stopped out of college and 7.7% were identified as being potential completers. As shown on Exhibit 17 on page 21, the numbers of students who re-enrolled in school grew by 9.1%, or about 78,000 students. Exhibit 18 on page 22 shows the students were most likely to re-enroll in an institution in a different sector, with most re-enrolling in a two-year public institution. However, a majority of the stop-outs were more likely to return to the institutions they were last enrolled in. As shown on Exhibit 19 on page 23, in Maryland, those with some college no credential increased 3.4% to over 588,000. As shown in Exhibit 20 on page 24, 7.4% had recently stopped out, and 7.9% are identified as potential completers. In general, there is a greater chance for the younger population with some college and no credential will re-enroll and attain a degree. Therefore, maybe the state and institutions should focus its efforts on re-engaging this population, which may include targeting services and support for them, including financial aid, as finances may have kept some from re-enrolling. And I'll turn it back to Kelly for the first issue.
Thank you. Moving to the issue section, which begins on page 25. The first issue covers the calculation of graduate credit hours of full-time equivalent students. The committee requested a work group composed of representatives of the public four-year institutions to establish a uniform calculation of the graduate credit hours to be used by all the institutions. The work group agreed to group the FTEs into 4 categories. Exhibit 21 on page 26 shows those categories and the calculation for each. The next issue begins on page 26 and covers the HBCU settlement funds. Exhibit 22 on page 27 shows the funding each HBCU has received since fiscal 2023, including the fiscal 2026 allowance. Funding can decrease from year to year, but it cannot go below $9 million. Bowie State has experienced 2 years of decreased HBCU settlement funds. Funding levels are determined by each institution's share of opening fall enrollment. Exhibit 23 on page 28 shows each HBCU's percentage of the opening fall enrollment for fiscal 2024 through 2026. You can see that Morgan State and University of Maryland Eastern Shore's proportion of total HBCU enrollment has grown, but Bowie State's has decreased. Exhibit 24 on page 30 shows how the 3 USM institutions expended their fiscal 2024 HBCU settlement funding. Bowie State and University of Maryland Eastern Shore expended the majority of their funding on academic programs, while almost half of Coppin State University's funding provided financial support and scholarships. DLS is requesting narrative on the HBCU's plans for the fiscal 2026 HBCU settlement funding. DLS has 2 operating budget recommended actions found on page 30. DLS is requesting the annual report on instructional faculty workload for the public 4-year institutions, as well as a report on the HBCU's plans for the fiscal 2026 HBCU settlement funding. And with that, we conclude our presentation. Thank you.
I just want to apologize for not introducing Sarah Baker. I began with Kelly Norton, so I just want to make sure we properly acknowledge both of our analysts, and thank you for this tremendous overview. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? All right, seeing none, we invite Chancellor J.A. Perman to come before us. And team, whoever you'd like to accompany you as well. Even when the news is not so good, it's always good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Chair Smith, I feel the same way. Vice Chair Harris, members of the subcommittee, I'm happy to join my colleagues in offering comment on the DLS analysis. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it. I'm grateful for the generous support that you all have shown to higher education and, of course, to the USM. To reinforce some of the comments about growth, the university system is celebrating our 2nd straight year of enrollment growth. We have our 2nd largest class of first-time full-time students ever. Our HBCUs together have their largest freshman class in 16 years. Undergraduate enrollment overall is the 4th highest in the system's history, and back to the numbers that we saw before the pandemic. And our graduate enrollment is up nearly 5% over last year. So all the rumors about the demise of interest in higher education, I think we're countering them in Maryland. And I think that's the opinion that's important. People are coming. Our success, I think, is very much due to our recruitment efforts. We want to demonstrate the value proposition. I think you've seen last year's extensive reports requested by the legislature on how our universities focus their activities on recruiting Maryland students. We received 55,000 in-state applications last year alone. And it's important to note that we accept 75% of those who apply. But our enrollment numbers are also a credit to how well we retain our students to graduation. Our retention and graduation rates in your public university system well exceed U.S. averages for public universities. And this success, in turn, ensures our contribution to the goal that was reported by the analysts, the state's 55% degree attainment goal. We're proud that Maryland's public universities exceeded MHEC's target by nearly 3,000 bachelor's degrees last year. Enabling our success on both of these fronts, recruitment attracting people, retaining them, is our affordability, which I detail in my written testimony. The affordability is a credit to the support we receive from the state. And I thank you again. Because the USM's foundational mission is access for all. Access for any Marylander who wants a college degree. That's what we should be doing. And we're continually pursuing ways to put that college degree within reach. In my written testimony, you'll see our efforts in re-enrolling those who stop out of their education. These are what we used to call non-traditional students. They are the traditional students now. They're not like a lot of us who graduated from high school and went to college, or they went to college and they had to stop out, and now they have a family, they've got kids, they've got a job. We have had to alter happily what we offer and when we offer it and where we offer it, so that these people can come back and get something that's going to better their lives. If I may, in my last set of remarks, I'd like to focus, because I'd like to get your ear, on our plans for Maryland Early College. You heard about all those people that are out there that ought to get a crack at college. We're working to build a sustainable early college model that allows Maryland students to attend high school and college at the same time, earning their diploma and college credits up to a full associate degree. We already have a number of duly enrolled students, almost 800 this year, up from 179 6 years ago. And we're very happy about that growth. But as I've shared with some of you, early college is a more intentional and immersive experience than dual enrollment programs, as important as the dual enrollment programs are. And it's targeted, frankly, to a different population of students. Dually enrolled students are often already on a college track, happily. But early college students tend to be the ones that you heard about from our analysts, those first generation students, low-income students, and others who, if you know them at 11 or 12 years old like I do, they're not thinking about college. They don't think college is for them. They're not college bound. And these are the students that we want to fully integrate into a college curriculum and also have them take some of their courses. We don't want to deprive them of the high school experience, but take some of their courses on a college campus so that they can see, I belong. I can belong. And of course, there's a lot to that. It takes wraparound academic and advising and mentoring services to give them the tools they need to navigate higher education, to become resilient, and ultimately earn a 4-year degree. I need you to know that we're focusing our efforts now, such as we can, within what we have in the way of resources, on Baltimore City and on Maryland's rural regions. And I would say in a heartfelt way, we're grateful for your support, your interest in pathway programs like these that in fact promote higher education access and equity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your remarks. I just want to say that it means a lot to hear that you're being really intentional about the early college effort. I'm a first-generation college graduate myself, and I know the doors that you're going to be opening through this program are going to help a lot of young people truly see themselves and envision their future in a way that might be difficult to do. And I do want to take opportunity to introduce a new member of our subcommittee, Delegate Beauchamp. And he's coming from the Eastern Shore, so I'm sure he'd like to hear the commitment to our rural areas as well, and not so rural, sometimes a little suburban out there as well. But are there any questions from the subcommittee? Hearing that, thank you so much for your time. I know that our good friend Matt Power was like, I could, or maybe not. So I just want to give you opportunity to speak on behalf of MICU universities and colleges.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith. Greatly appreciate it. Members of the subcommittee, thank you. I'm Matt Power, the president of the Maryland Independent College and University Association. I want to thank Ms. Norton and Ms. Baker for their excellent analysis. I think they did a great job showing some of the demographic challenges faced by higher education moving forward. Certainly our institutions are really thankful to the Moore administration for level funding in FY26, but I think I just also want to remind all of you of the significant cuts that we took last year. Our program was reduced by about 48% last year, and obviously that reduction was particularly painful because it was distributed in a way that hurt some of our institutions a lot more than others. So we all recognize the incredibly difficult jobs you have in front of you this year, and we also realize that FY26 is not the year to ask for increased funding or restoration of cuts. That said, it is our long-term goal to ideally work with you and other members of the Assembly to increase the funding and make sure that the funding is distributed in a way that is equitable to all of our institutions. You know, at a time when the nation needs a highly educated workforce to compete in the economy, higher education is facing a collection of really unprecedented challenges right now. For those of you who were watching the news yesterday, you're very well aware of all that. Higher education is under attack at the national level, and it's being felt on all of our campuses by all of our students. Last year, colleges closed throughout the country, hurting not just the students that attended, but also leaving tremendous voids in their communities. Colleges do a lot more than simply educate students. They're employers, cultural centers, neighborhood anchors, and critical supporters of local businesses, and they're integral to the fabric of the community. Thankfully, in Maryland, we haven't suffered that fate recently, and it is because of our strong partnerships with our community colleges, with the public universities, and of course the state of Maryland, the General Assembly. So we're really grateful for that partnership and thankful for the opportunity to continue to work with you. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today, and we look forward to working with you throughout the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Power, for your testimony. Are there, maybe before you run, any questions for Mr. Power? I just wanted to tell you that, and I didn't get to share this because it applies to obviously the University of Maryland system and also our private institutions and those who are not in either but are here in the room as well, that there's a reason why this subcommittee is called Education and Economic Development, because they go together. And not only do your graduates become employees, they become employers and innovators and people who start, businesses. And it's because of the really rich and robust higher education community we have in Maryland that we're able to do so many things that save people's lives by creating new ways, through the health sciences. And I know UMBC, they're going to have something, I think, going to Mars soon on a trip. So, I mean, we're going to the stars and beyond, and we're also helping people right here on the ground in the United States. So I just want to commend both of your institutions for the leadership they provide to our state. Not just education, but economic development as well. Okay, you can go back to your seat.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith.
Yeah. I know that there are a few others that maybe didn't sign up to provide oral remarks, but I see some presidents in the room, and I want to make sure, particularly Dr. Jordan, you came quite a way. I think you should say something to us. And I know that we're going to cherish the time we have with you this session because we know you're going to retirement, and we want to ensure that we hear from you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
When you said that word retirement, I got that
You're
big smile
going to a much better tomorrow.
So it is really a pleasure to be here and always to be before this committee and to be with you, Chair Smith. St. Mary's College, it's a gem. But before I begin, let me express my appreciation for your continued support of St. Mary's College and of higher education in the state of Maryland. Your support of the sector is exemplary and should be held as a national model for other states too. So thank you so much. Additionally, I want to thank the analysts for their excellent work. We really appreciate all that you do in the short period of time that you do and how responsive you are when we have questions. With the spring semester now underway, I'm pleased to let you know that St. Mary's College continues to do well. Total enrollment continues to grow and is up 13% since 2020, despite the flawed rollout of the simplified FAFSA last year. Our enrollment increase success is the result of several significant initiatives, two of which I will highlight. First, the implementation of our Learning Through Experiential and Applied Discovery, or the LEAD initiative. That curriculum integrates the proven long-term benefits of a traditional liberal arts education with the applied professional skills demanded in today's economy and enhanced engagement with high-impact practices. It is something that we make available to all our students, not just to a select few. Second, we've modified the criteria that guide our decisions for adding new academic programs to include relevance to students and stakeholders, as well as projected financial sustainability within a defined period of time. The result is new programs in marine science and business administration, which have become the college's second and third most popular majors in just 3 years, as well as the integration of new data science curricula across multiple majors within the last few years. Each of these initiatives is resonating well with prospective students and their families and have contributed to a 22% increase in applications over the last 5 years. In fact, the number of first-time applicants to the college has more than doubled since our pre-pandemic levels. I also want to point out that while we have worked hard to grow enrollment, we have remained committed to the goals set forth by the legislature for St. Mary's College. And they are to provide an exceptional honors college program coupled with promise of access, affordability, and diversity. Our entering classes remain increasingly credentialed and increasingly diverse, not just along race and ethnicity lines, but also about gender and ability. And we have significantly increased need-based aid to support students from low-income families. With respect to affordability, we have frozen tuition for 5 consecutive years, thanks to your support by updating and reaffirming our annual funding formula, a unique formula appropriate for the college's unique position in Maryland's higher ed sector, allowing us to adapt strategically and quickly to the rapidly evolving higher education landscape. That support has been critical to enabling the college to reset its tuition at a more competitive rate. Today, tuition remains less than it was in 2013, and our students graduate with almost 30% less debt than the national average. Your support of St. Mary's College has contributed to this success, so I thank you again for your support. I know you have a lot of work to do, so in my traditional fashion, my report is short. I am happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your overview. Are there any questions? Thank you for your time.
He's smiling, really. Yeah,
He has good vibes.
yeah, he does, doesn't he? Thank you.
I see Dr. Wilson, see your head was down. We almost missed you there from Morgan State University. Do you have any remarks you'd like to share?
Chair Smith and other members of the committee, I would also like to express my appreciation to you for your support of higher education in Maryland generally, and certainly for your support of Morgan State University. I also want to express my gratitude to the analysts for a superb job as always, and so thank you very much. I too will just make a few comments to just kind of give you a sense of what we called unparalleled historical momentum at Morgan, the likes of which we have not seen in our 158-year history. And a lot of that, of course, is because of the investments that the state is making in that institution, in facilities, in programs that have enabled us to become the fastest growing institution in our state and one of the fastest growing institutions in the United States. In terms of enrollment, we really have reached our capacity at Morgan. We are seeking to expand the campus, especially within the next decade. We have acquired 59 acres of property that is about 3/4 of a mile from the campus because we are contiguous now. And we are in the process of master planning that 59-acre site. That was the site of the former Lake Clifton High School. And so we will be working hand in glove with the neighborhoods in Baltimore City that abut that property to make sure that we build it out in a way that is going to be very inclusive and that will even have a greater impact on economic development in the area. We are just shy of 11,000 students at Morgan. The enrollment has increased by over 30% in the last 5 years. We have students from 46 states and 70 countries, though 56% of the students come from the state of Maryland, and we have every single county represented at Morgan as well. We also, with this high demand, we had north of 25,000 applications last year, so this is the 4th straight year where we've had record freshman classes. We took in 2,450 or so new freshmen this past year. That was an increase of about 50 or so over the previous year. The previous year was an increase over the previous year. And so at about 11,000, we are basically now plateaued because many of the students, of course, all of them really, they want to stay on campus. It means that we have to invest more in instruction. And so all of that is coming, if you will, at a point where the institution just simply needs to pause for a moment and make sure that our infrastructure is catching up with the great demand. Also, with our Board of Regents, we have ongoing discussions about cost. We know that one of the major inhibitors to not only enroll in college, but to finish college is cost. And so we keep that front and center. And I believe we have a third lowest tuition amongst public institutions in the state. Even with the cuts that we are receiving this year, we understand that, to our operating budget. I put in place a committee at Morgan to look at how we're going to do that. But I started out with 4 principles in mind. And one is that we will not try and close this gap on the backs of our students, that we are not going to raise tuition exorbitantly. And so we're going to look at other ways of doing that. And so we're going to stay true to affordability. Also, Morgan is really ascending in the research space. Just to put this in context, when I arrived at Morgan, we were bringing in about $23 million a year in research contracts. This past year, we surpassed $88 million. And as I sit here 6 months into the fiscal year, we have already passed $88 million, and we are well on track to surpass $100+ million in research contracts by June 30th of this year. Also, with regard to patents and spinoffs, we are setting all kinds of records there too. So nationally, each year, a list comes out from the patent office looking at the amount of research expenditures of the top 100 universities in the country, and then the number of patents there. So Morgan made the list of 100 in terms of patents. This is the first time that an HBCU in the nation has made that list, but we had 13 patents in 2023, 2024. And just in terms of comparison, those 13 patents actually resulted from only $29 million in research expenditures. When you look at a couple of institutions that are ahead of us. One is the University of Georgia, for example. I use them because it's public, it's there. They had $500 million in research expenditures to Morgan's $29 million, but only produced 2 more patents. And so we feel that we are giving the state a tremendous return on the investment that it is making in us, and also some of those patents are resulting in spin-off companies. Also, just a couple more points here, and then I'll bring this to a close. I guess I can say I don't, even though we have discussions with the board about this. I don't pay a whole lot of attention, and I'll go on the record here, with U.S. News and World Report rankings, right? I've gone behind all of that, and I just think it is not at all even close to understanding the value and the quality of an undergraduate institution. We all get these surveys, and I have to make judgment on universities from the University of Wyoming to the University of Montana to Harvard and Yale, and I don't know anything about those schools, but yet my opinion is going to count 30%. And so if you have baked-in bias there, you're just not going to do well in that survey like that. But I have to say that Morgan made a list about a month ago that I did value. Our business school ranks number 60 in the United States by Bloomberg Business Week. And so ranked below us are schools like Syracuse and others, but it's the first time that an HBCU has ever made the list of the top 70 business schools in the country. The Graves Business School was there. And then finally, we have, of course, brought into existence at Morgan a new college. It's now in its 3rd year. It's called the College of Interdisciplinary and Continuing Studies. And that college is targeting the some college, no degree population. We've been keeping our eyes on that population at Morgan actually for about 8 years. I serve on the board of directors of the Lumina Foundation, and so this is a major, major priority for us, for the nation, simply because we have just surpassed 40 million people in the United States with some college, no degree. So that college now is enrolling about 200 students. The Board of Regents passed 18 completer degrees, 8 baccalaureate degrees, 5 master's degrees, and 5 doctoral degrees. And so we are on track with the new College of Interdisciplinary and Continuing Studies to reach 2,000 students, perhaps in about 3 years. And so while our growth in terms of residential students, we may have to kind of pause that just for a moment. We may pick it up in the online environment as all of these degrees will be offered online. And so Chair Smith and members of the committee, let me close by thanking you again for the investments that you're making in Morgan. We hold high our responsibility to give the state of Maryland the very highest dividend on that investment. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Thank you for your steady leadership. And I mean, there's a lot to be excited about in your remarks on Vice Chair Harris.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. President, for coming here. I think I would get beat up if I go back to my office and not share that I have 2 staffers in my office from Morgan that currently go to school in Morgan. They're doing extremely well, so, and that goes and shows the testament of what you all are producing. But also St. Mary's College, I will say that, you know, last year I did have one from St. Mary's College. I'm not giving him a shout out because he left me to go be the chief of staff for the vice chair of ECM. We trained him well. But I just wanted, my point there is saying that our students in the state of Maryland are excelling and doing extremely, extremely great in these colleges, and it benefits us and makes us look even better as we strive to do the work for the state of Maryland. So thank you all for what you all have done and continue to do.
And thank you and others as well for making these opportunities available to our students.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony and your remarks. We want to move on to Secretary Rye with MHAC. So glad to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and Vice Chair Harris and committee members. I'm Dr. Sanjay Rai. I have the honor of serving as Maryland's Secretary for Higher Education. Chair Smith, I want to thank you for your leadership on this committee, and we look forward to working with you on strengthening our already wonderful higher education system that we have in our state. I'll keep my comments here today broad and inclusive of all higher education segments, public and independent, and hold my Maryland Higher Education Commission specific comments to MHEC's budget hearing that will be held in mid-February. Before I start my formal remarks, I want to thank all the leaders of higher education who spoke before me. We have one of the greatest institutions of higher education in our state of Maryland. And the people who lead these institutions who spoke before me, they are one of the best and most renowned leaders in the country on higher education. I want to thank them for their leadership in our state of Maryland. You heard some comments about our efforts towards 55% goals that were set in 2013. You'll hear a lot from me during the year on those goals. But let me tell you, the target that was set by Maryland Higher Education Commission in 2013 for the institutions of higher education to reach 55%, that was around 718,000 undergraduate degrees. By 2023, our institutions have already produced 724,000 students. We have two more years to get to 25 number. We are reporting 24 numbers right now. Those numbers will go further. And this progress happened during time of enrollment decline. So we thank our institutions for their extraordinary effort in that area. Because the state of Maryland is under budgetary constraint, we realize that adjustments will have to be made to meet the Moore-Miller administration's goal to grow our economy, apply a fiscally responsible strategy, and invest in our core priorities. Yet, the proposed FY 2026 budget continues to invest significantly in higher education, providing funding to continue the transformative work underway across the Maryland. You heard some of the great examples from Chancellor and also from President Wilson. The budget allows the system of post-secondary education to fulfill their mission of helping to meet the talent needs of our state by addressing key areas such as workforce shortages, technological changes, while contributing to a thriving economy in our state. I'll share some of the highlights of our budget. MHAC and other areas of higher education will receive over $858 million in funding, representing a 2.3% increase in funding over the last year. Our wonderful community colleges will receive over $504 million for the state portion of their budget. The state's nonprofit colleges and universities will receive over $73 million to support their institutional operations. The state's public universities will receive $2.4 billion in operational funds. The governor has also allocated a record-breaking $138 million in state funding to the Howard P. Rawling Educational Excellence Award programs, which supports students with the greatest level of financial need. This is an increase of over 21% in funding over last year's budget. The work in higher education is transformative, and for decades has positively impacted individuals, communities, states, and society. Higher education also serves as a key driver of personal growth, economic mobility, social equity, innovation, and business creation. Yet, there are threats to post-secondary education, which include rising costs, and student debt, accessibility and affordability, equity gaps, workforce alignment, technological changes, mental health and well-being, and institutional stability. MHEC is intensifying efforts to expand our historic mission by addressing rising costs and student debt and college access and affordability by providing a more streamlined access to financial aid resources. MHEC has also been dedicating to refining the academic program approval process to maintain high standards of quality, align programs with workforce demands, and support institutional sustainability. This past fall, MHEC hosted the state's inaugural Student Success Summit, where we released draft post-2025 goals that align with the vision for post-secondary education outlined in the Moore-Miller strategic plan. These goals are aimed at eliminating achievement gaps, fostering completion, enhancing the value of every credential, and enhancing research and innovation across our state. The development of our new state plan is a vital step towards transforming higher education to equip learners with the skills and knowledge needed to thrive in the 21st century economy and be an engaged and capable citizens. With the powerful vision of the Moore-Miller administration and the incredible leadership here at the General Assembly, we aim to provide Maryland residents with numerous post-secondary pathways in order to ensure the continued success of our great state. As higher education leaders, we are not just preparing students for the personal success, we are creating an investment in strengthening Maryland's economy. Before I close, I'd like to share the story of Aaron, a current Morgan State student whose journey demonstrates the life-changing impact of Maryland's higher education investments. Despite facing significant mental health challenges and initially being denied admission to Morgan State University, Aaron found his path through Maryland's wraparound support systems. After developing IT skills at Solars Point Technical High School, he was accepted into Morgan State's Cybersecurity Intelligence Management Program as a member of his inaugural class. Thanks to MHEC scholarships and critical campus services, Aaron achieved a 3.2 GPA his first year. Now, as a second year, he is thriving academically while supporting his brother with autism and working towards a debt-free graduation. Stories like Aaron's show how our investments are not only transforming lives, but also addressing critical workforce shortages in the areas like cybersecurity, where thousands of jobs, high-paying jobs, remain unfilled in Maryland. The impact of state funding for post-secondary education becomes clear in Aaron's story. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present higher education overview today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Rai, for that overview. I think for some of us who've been around a while, we've seen an evolution in MHAC and the way you're constituted, some streamlining of the scholarship delivery and all of that ultimately benefits the students of Maryland. So just thank you for your stewardship and leadership on that front. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Brad, I see you, Mr. Brad Phillips from Maryland Community Colleges.
I was wondering, but
You were hiding behind Dr. Wilson somehow.
well, thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brad Phillips, Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and I will keep it brief. I know I get another shot later when we talk about the aid to community colleges. I will just echo my sentiment as well to the analysts. Thank you very much for the detailed and thorough response. We share the values that you express in re-engaging with students and building the workforce. Madam Chair, you've already said my testimony. There's no other segment situated better than community colleges to actually do economic development. And the health of your economy is directly pegged to the economic opportunities that are available to students that are on the margins, that are underrepresented. I'm glad to be able to say these words in the state of Maryland that you can't say nationally. Having more diversity, engaged in higher education and post-secondary opportunities. If you look at the analysis, we hit those goals when you include credentials other than an associate's degree. And I'll just say, in wrapping this up, that the growth in community colleges, the analysis has a lot of our credit enrollment for transfer programs. We're the lifeblood for our four-year universities behind us. But we're also seeing immense growth in other credentials of value, particularly around areas that are in severe workforce shortages like cyber. The governor is really investing in community colleges and uplifting our work to develop our cybersecurity infrastructure. We've been grateful to a number of economic grants through the state and federal earmarks, I think, that are still going to be coming to community colleges to build out this infrastructure. And with that, we're really appreciative of your committee's work in understanding the value of community colleges. We're pleased with the funding formula this year. While we were rebased last year, and we hope to be able to someday get back to the level of which we were, we're grateful this year to be able to move forward with what the governor's budget has allowed for us. And with that, thank you for your time, and here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I was just telling my vice chair about 5 minutes ago that the federal administration has rescinded their freeze on grants. So I don't know if I'm delivering that good news right now, but just let you know.
Thank you.
For now, that's
Changes
what's going
by
on.
the hour.
Yeah. We're up to the minute here in EED. That's all I can give you. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, great afternoon, Mr. Braz. Greatly see you here. And I echo your sentiments. Obviously, I'm a big component of certifications as well as in that cyber world. That's what I do for a living. And I know that getting those certifications can put people in the workforce ASAP, as well as provide them the ability to go to a four-year college and able to pay for it, and or have the companies in which they work with pay for these particular degrees. So my question will be to your last point about the community colleges and the funding. So we saw in the governor's budget how our community colleges will be funded, but there was one in particular that caught my attention and received a couple of phone calls about is the College of Southern Maryland. And so I want to give you a chance to speak to that piece and give your thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I'll try to simplify this. Changes in the formula last year removed the hold harmless, and it changed the calculation on FTEs that run into our formula. It was the greater of the most recent year FTEs or the 3-year average of the past 3 years. Last year, a lot of our colleges had the greater growth when you averaged the 3 years because it included a lot of pre-pandemic enrollment. Well, this year, all the colleges are experiencing growth, and they're using the most recent FTEs. But because of this arbitrary calculation of last year there being a larger number when you average in multiple years, it looks as though there are fewer students that are enrolled in our community colleges, and particularly College of Southern Maryland. And it's 17 FTEs difference, but the cost is $850,000. And I know that that is not the committee's intent with those formula changes. So we're hoping, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in our aid to community colleges, to restate that hold harmless so that things like this can't happen going forward. These immediate changes, you're already seeing the impact on College of Southern Maryland. You're seeing the impact also on the Community College of Baltimore County. And I don't think that you all intended for that to happen, especially when you're showing growth over multiple years, receiving funding, less funding than you did the year prior. So I hope to work with the committees, both here and in the Senate, to resolve this problem.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the question. Illuminating. Appreciate your testimony. Are there any other higher education institutional leaders that I've missed by chance? It's not stadium seating in here, so sometimes it's hard to see everyone. Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for their testimony. Thank you, Chancellor Perman. Thank you for your leadership. And that will conclude our budget hearing for the higher education overview. We're going to move on to the next part of our agenda, and that will be regarding the Governor's Office for Children. And there will be a presentation by Budget Analyst Madeline Miller.
I said that's my good luck.
Can folks please move outside so we can move on? Thank you so much. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith and committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS budget analysis for the Governor's Office for Children, or GOC. This agency was reestablished last spring to promote the well-being of children and families and reduce the number of children living in poverty. In fiscal 2026, its budget increases by $35 million to $105.9 million, as shown on the graph on the cover sheet. However, I want to draw your attention to Exhibit 1 on page 2, which shows another picture of planned spending. This exhibit excludes the agency's special fund expenditure. In both fiscal 2025 and 2026, the agency's budget includes general funds to be contributed to the Engaging Neighborhoods Organizations, Unions, Governments, and Households Grant Fund, and the Special Fund Grant Expenditure. Flipping back to the cover sheet, the allowance includes approximately $75.8 million for enough grants, other non-personnel enough program expenditures, and enough capacity building grants to local management boards. Half of that, or $37.9 million, is the general fund appropriation, and half of that is special fund appropriation. Excluding the special fund expenditure, the fiscal 2026 allowance increases by $17.2 million to $68.1 million. Chapter 408 of 2024, which created the Enough program, mandated that at least $15 million in general funds be appropriated to the Enough Grant Fund in fiscal 2026, and the allowance includes $37.9 million for this purpose, far surpassing the mandated level. Turning now to page 3 and the fiscal 24 heading, I'd like to mention that the fiscal 25 budget included a deficiency to begin agency operations with 4 positions transferred from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy and 4 from the Department of Juvenile Services. In addition to personnel costs, the agency also spent $300,000 on a contract with the Children's Funding Project for fiscal mapping and the development of a public centralized database of all resources available for children, youth, and families as required by Chapter 408. This database must be published by the start of fiscal 2026. At the start of fiscal 25, grant funding associated with the Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund, or CCIF, transferred from GOCPP to the agency. GOC also began implementing 5 legislative priorities from Section 21, as listed on pages 3 and 4. 2 of those are $5 million priorities that would revert spending to the Enough Grant Fund instead of to the general fund if not used for their limited purposes in fiscal 2025. One of the $5 million amounts was to be made available to local management boards. GOC reports that this funding was awarded as the Enough Capacity Building Grant. The other $5 million was to be for the public centralized database I described previously. Funds not needed for the database in fiscal 25 may also be spent on Enough grants in that year. Approximately $381,000 of that $5 million will be used on costs associated with the database in addition to the funding provided or funding used in fiscal 24. Also during fiscal 25, GOC launched the Enough Grant Program, releasing application guidance on July 1 and providing pre-application technical assistance to applicants in July through September. This initiative is intended to provide a direct investment to support communities that have experienced multi-generational poverty and its consequences. Only certain neighborhoods are eligible for participation, and GOC is responsible for reporting information about the eligibility to local governments. Eligible neighborhoods change over time, with funding in the first years of the program focused on neighborhoods with more than 30% of children living in poverty and served by a community school with a concentration of poverty level of at least 80% for fiscal 25 and 26. The second condition decreases to 75% in fiscal 27 through 29, 60% in 2030, and at least 55% thereafter. For the initial round of grants, 12 jurisdictions had communities eligible to apply for one of 3 tracks. Those were partnership, planning, and implementation grants. The initiative's design intends for participants to receive additional public and private funding as their partnership governance and ability to address outcomes in the 4 enough results areas evolve. Those 4 areas are cradle to career education, healthy families, economically secure families, and safe and thriving communities. In December of 2024, GOC awarded 27 recipients a total of $13.1 million in enough awards. Though the agency has been reestablished for approximately 1 year, it has been able to quickly develop program requirements and regulations, conduct outreach about the program to potential applicants, and award the majority of available funding. It will take additional time for the program's success to be verifiable in the recipient communities. Exhibit 2 on page 7 provides an overview of agency spending in fiscal 26. Approximately 71.5% is dedicated to the Enough program when counting the general and special fund appropriations. Spending on CCIF grants and contracts, including funding for local management boards, the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund grant, and local care team coordinators will total approximately 24.3%. Personnel and operating expenses make up the remaining 4.2% of expenditures. Exhibit 3 on pages 8 and 9 details the changes in the budget between fiscal 25 and 26. GOC's personnel expenditure is expected to grow by $1.4 million for the addition of 11 new positions. Most of the growth in the agency's budget comes from spending on the Enough initiative. General fund expenditure increases by approximately $22.9 million. Growth in the budget is offset by the removal of legislative priority spending from fiscal 25. The Enough Grant Fund was created by Chapter 408 and may only be used to distribute grants through the Enough program. The working appropriation includes up to $15 million in general funds paid into the special fund and $15 million in special fund expenditures for Enough grantees when excluding the LMBs receiving the Enough LMB Capacity Building Grant. Chapter 408 also established a mandate for the governor to pay at least $15 million into the fund in fiscal 26. No growth from the agency's fiscal 25 budget is required to meet the mandated amount. However, the allowance grows by approximately $22.9 million in general funds for spending on Enough grants and related program support, with the maximum special fund authorization increasing to $37.9 million. The Department of Legislative Services recommends reducing the general fund appropriation for the Enough Grant Fund account by $22.9 million and the special fund authorization by a corresponding amount to provide the mandated funding level in fiscal 26. Another area of general fund grant expenditure for GOC is providing grants to local management boards through the Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund. The allowance decreases by $750,000 in general funds for grants to LMBs compared to the working appropriation due to the removal of legislative priority spending on pandemic recovery grants. Each LMB is expected to receive the same proportion of the total award in the allowance as in the previous fiscal year, as shown in Exhibit 4 on page 11. This exhibit excludes the funding associated with the Enough program in fiscal 25 and 26. In fiscal 26, Baltimore City's LMB is expected to receive approximately $3.3 million. Chapter 25 of 2019 established a mandated appropriation to the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund through Baltimore City's LMB. I apologize for the comma there, that should be through. The mandate was set at $3.5 million beginning in fiscal 21. The mandate expired in fiscal 2024. Due to the expiration of the funding mandate, DLS recommends eliminating the $3.5 million general fund appropriation for the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund grant. A chart with information on the agency's personnel is shown on the bottom half of page 12. In fiscal 26, the agency receives 11 new regular positions, with 6 supporting the Enough program. The remaining 5 will facilitate the agency's administration of the Children's Cabinet and support the agency's role as a coordinating office. GOC, in its testimony today, should comment on how the addition of these positions will increase its ability to fulfill its mission. The key observations section begins on page 13. And Exhibit 5, which is on pages 13 and 14, describes the agency's reporting requirements in the current fiscal year through fiscal 27. Some of those reporting requirements include engaging with applicants and providing technical assistance with each grant cycle, facilitating at least 4 open meetings of the Children's Cabinet annually, publishing a report on the Enough program annually, producing a report on neighborhood indicators of poverty by October 1st, 2025, submitting the state's 3-year plan for children, youth, and families by December 1st, 2025, and evaluating the Enough program by June 1st, 2027. Another reporting expectation of the agency is participation in the annual Managing for Results performance analysis. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting GOC to create detailed agency objectives and performance measures and to submit proposed measures by December 1st, 2025. The second key observation is on youth out-of-home placements, and it begins on page 14. The 4 primary agencies that oversee the welfare of children placed outside of the home are the Department of Human Services, DJS, the Maryland Department of Health, and the Maryland State Department of Education. Language in the fiscal 25 budget restricted funds from the data reporting agencies until GOC submitted the out-of-home placements report. The number of youth experiencing at least 1 out-of-home placement in fiscal 24 declined 5.8% from the fiscal 2023 level to 5,730 youth. Exhibit 6 on page 16 details the rate of out-of-home placements per 1,000 youth by jurisdiction. Most jurisdictions, 19 of those listed, had fewer out-of-home placements in fiscal 24 in 2023 or in 2022. The 5,730 youth experienced a combined 12,918 placements in fiscal 24, with nearly half of placements being in the same county of origin. Only 292 youth were placed out of state, including to family homes that are out of state. Exhibit 7 on page 17 shows the number of youths placed out of state between fiscal 2020 and 2024. The population of youths out of state increased by 5% between fiscal 23 and 24. However, the fiscal 2024 level remains 9.3% lower than in fiscal 2021 and 43.4% lower than in fiscal 2020. A slightly larger percentage of children were placed in an out-of-state family home in fiscal 2024 compared with the 2 previous years. Additional placements may be made to family homes in future years. In fiscal 25, Chapter 429 of 2024 went into effect, which expands the definition of kinship caregiver, requires the placement of a child with a kinship caregiver if a kinship caregiver is located subsequent to the child's placement in a foster care setting, and specifies considerations that must be taken into account when placing a child in an out-of-home care if kinship caregivers cannot be located. GOC and the data reporting agencies have substantively fulfilled the requirements set forth by the fiscal 2025 budget language. DLS therefore recommends that $100,000 in withheld general funds for each of the data reporting agencies be released, and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised during the hearing today or in the hearing in front of the Senate Subcommittee. DLS recommends adding a section to the budget bill restricting funds in each of the data contributing agencies pending the submission of the 2025 out-of-home placement report. Recommended actions begin on page 19, and a summary of JCR responses from GOC can be found on page 22. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I feel like I have a loose understanding, but maybe for the benefit of everyone, could you describe what kinship care is?
That would be
like a community member that isn't always necessarily a blood relative? Is that sometimes?
I would defer to the agency.
Defer to the agency, because I think it would be beneficial for everyone to get that, so no problem. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation. At this time, we'll call Secretary Carmel Martin and team.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Smith and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today as you review the proposed operating budget for the Governor's Office for Children for fiscal year 2026. As the Chairwoman mentioned, I am Carmel Martin, Special Secretary for the Governor's Office for Children. I'm joined today by Cleo Hirsch, Chief of Staff for the Governor's Office for Children, and Pickett Slater Harrington, Director of the Enough Initiative. I want to start by thanking Ms. Madeline Miller, our DLS analyst, for her thoughtful and thorough analysis. As you know, in January of 2024, the governor issued an executive order reestablishing the Governor's Office for Children, or GOC. Since then, in a short amount of time, we have staffed up, established an interagency process through the Children's Cabinet, and launched the Enough Initiative, the governor's strategy for tackling the root causes of poverty. As the governor has said, the Enough Initiative is not just a bill or a program, it is an approach to governing. The GOC strives to ensure that our work across state government is aligned, effective, and efficient. The themes that you will see throughout our work and at the heart of the Enough Initiative are data and evidence-based strategy, driven by community needs and voice, and executed through strong cross-sector partnership. To tackle child poverty, we need a comprehensive approach. Through the Enough Initiative, we are able to support communities at the neighborhood level to think across sectors and programmatic silos, to better leverage existing resources to tackle concentrated intergenerational poverty. We've been mirroring that approach at the county level through our work with our partners at the local management boards and at the state level in our work across the Children's Cabinet. I'd like to take a moment to highlight a few examples that illustrate GOC's work and impact over the last year. We completed all programmatic requirements of the Enough Grant Program, including building an eligibility map, notifying all local governments of the neighborhoods eligible to participate, and identifying the first cohort of grant recipients. 27 grantees have been selected to serve in our inaugural Enough cohort. These 27 grantees will support approximately 30,000 children living in poverty, and almost 500 organizations and local government partners will participate at partnership tables in each neighborhood coalition. We've developed partnerships with several nonprofit organizations with proven track records of place-based poverty work, including the William Julius Wilson Institute at the Harlem Children's Zone, Purpose-Built Communities, Partners for Rural Impact, Strive Together, and Baltimore's Promise. Each are providing robust one-on-one coaching and technical assistance to our communities. We've worked with our colleagues on the Children's Cabinet, local management boards, the private sector, and with stakeholders across the state to address a broad spectrum of issues, including benefits access, food insecurity, and high-quality childcare and education. And inspired by the legislature's commitment, philanthropic and private sector institutions have come together to amplify the state's investment with an initial commitment of $100 million to form an Enough Alliance. Now I'd like to turn to our written testimony, and beginning on page 8, respond to the recommendations in the DLS analysis. The first recommendation on page 9 states that it recommends reducing the funds appropriated to the Enough Grant Fund account by $22.9 million. We respectfully disagree. The design of the Enough Act requires increased funding to be successful. GOC built 3 tracks of grants to align with the statute and meet communities at the level of readiness for this complex work. In the first year, we anticipated that most grantees would need time to develop partnerships and/or conduct community needs assessments and develop neighborhood action plans to address the root causes of child poverty, aligned with the Enough statute. Therefore, we provided for partnership grants, which we call Track 1 grants, and plan development grants, or Track 2 grants, to get them started. We anticipated that only a small number of communities would be ready for implementation grants, or Track 3 grants, in fiscal year 2025. In this inaugural year, 24 of the 27 grants went to communities to develop cross-sector partnerships and develop neighborhood action plans. However, we anticipate that most of those communities will be ready to advance to the next stage, and many will be ready for implementation in FY 2026, requiring a higher level of funding in the second year of the program. 3 of the 27 grants went to communities that were ready to implement action plans to reduce child poverty. However, given the need to ramp up activities over time and the 6-month grant period in the fiscal 2025 cycle, given the newness of our office and the program, we made smaller grants in the first year with a plan for larger grants in the second year as they move to fully implement their neighborhood action plans. Without the increase in funding anticipated by the statute, communities with implementation grants will not be able to fulfill their requirements or their current the requirements of their current grants, and partnership and planning development communities who have completed required activities will not receive funding to take the next step in fiscal year 2026. Today, the state of Maryland invests billions of dollars into anti-poverty initiatives, but our work is often siloed, which minimizes our collective impact. This investment will help unlock the true potential of the state's significant and impressive investment in supporting children and families, as well as significant investment from the private sector. This requires a modest but strategic investment at the community level, which the Enough grant program offers. We acknowledge that we're in tight fiscal times, but we can't wait to address this critical issue. As the governor has said, child poverty affects all of us. And as he has pointed out, the rates of concentrated generational poverty in Maryland have looked the same for decades, and they will remain the same if we do not act. We need to do everything in our power to ensure that another generation of children in Maryland do not lose out on their opportunity to live up to their potential. The second recommendation on page 12 is that in the DLS analysis is eliminating the $3.5 million general fund appropriation for Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund grant. We respectfully disagree. The Baltimore Children and Youth Fund grant is included in the fiscal 2026 allowance, as it remains a critical piece of our work to address and tackle childhood poverty in Baltimore City. Baltimore City has the largest total number and proportion of Maryland children living in poverty, representing more than 30,000 children. Additionally, Baltimore City has 69 enough eligible census tracts, representing 59% of the total eligible census tracts in the state. Baltimore Children and Youth Fund aligns with GOC's 4 pillars under the Enough Grant Program, which are cradle to career education, healthy families, economically secure families, and safe and thriving communities. In FY 25, 11 organizations received funding to support programs and strategies, including high school out-of-school programs for students in Enough grantee neighborhoods, home instruction for parents of preschool youngsters for families in Park Heights and Cherry Hill, 2 of the Enough implementation grantees, and notably over $2 million to support the Healthy Families Home Visiting Strategy, which is a part of Be More for Healthy Babies initiative, the citywide initiative, which is drastically reducing infant mortality through family and caregiver education, community outreach training, and media campaigns. The third recommendation on page 14, DLS analysis recommends that GOC submit proposed managing for results goals, objectives, and measures with the agency's fiscal 2027 budget. We agree with the DLS recommendation and will ensure MFR goals, objectives, and measures are submitted by December 1st, 2025. Lastly, I would turn your attention to the recommendations on page 18 with respect to the filing of the out-of-home placement report. We agree to filing the out-of-home placement report with the following requested amendment. GOC requests that the one-day counts for out-of-home placements be tied to October 15th instead of January 1st. One-day counts on January 1st may be artificially skewed and not representative, particularly because of proximity to the holidays. GOC consulted with DHS, which recommended October 15th as a more representative date in which to pull a one-day count. This concludes our testimony. Thank you again for the opportunity, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Martin. Are there any questions or comments from the subcommittee? Well, I just wanted to bring up something. So I know that you had objections to some of the reductions that were proposed by DLS. Now, I know I made this inquiry during the bill hearing, and I think it's still relevant now. We have a lot of different methods of assessing the needs of community. We have hospitals that have requirements to do their needs assessments. We also have the community schools that have a requirement to provide needs assessments for their school community. And it feels like, yet again, there's a lot of funds going into, again, assessing and reassessing in the same community some of the same assessments that are already happening before we're even getting dollars out to the communities. And so for me, and the times that we're in that are very trying, it is deeply concerning that it feels like we're just busy redoing work that other really great people are already doing. And I think we already know that, like, what causes childhood poverty. Caregivers and parents don't make enough money, right? So connecting caregivers and parents to better employment opportunities, job training, transportation, and childcare, those are the systemic changes that need to happen so that children can get out of poverty. I'm trying to really fundamentally understand the connection between the grant program presented here and getting to the root causes of poverty, which seems that none of those organizations are capitalized to address systemic problems.
Thank you, Chairwoman. That's a terrific question. What I would say is that what we're trying to accomplish with enough is to ensure that we are building on those ongoing efforts by building a partnership table that brings the people who are looking at the healthcare needs of people in the communities that we're focused on with the education needs. Every enough grant requires that the community school in that neighborhood, or schools plural, must be at the table in that conversation and bring the needs assessment information that they have developed to the table, likewise with respect to the healthcare sector, the workforce sector. So what we think makes the Enough initiative unique and necessary is it brings those efforts together, so we ensure that as people in the education sector are struggling to address needs that they're seeing with their students and their families, that they have a table that they've set with those in the healthcare system, the childcare system, the workforce system, the housing system. And we're trying to replicate what we're trying to do at the state level through the Children's Cabinet at the neighborhood level, and making sure it's critically important that the people who live in those communities also have a seat at the table, and they're driving the vision for their community and have a voice in the plans that are being made. But just an example, and a big piece, this is a relatively small amount of money, and it's only going to work if these partnership tables are drawing upon existing programs and services and make sure that we're maximizing their impact for that community. So for example, in a particular community, a big challenge might be connecting people in the community to job training so they could get a good job. For some of those families, they can have access to the best job training program in the world, but if they don't have childcare for their children or don't have transportation to get to that job program, it's irrelevant to them. So this is a way to set a table where it says we're going to collectively make sure that the people in this community have the resources they need to access those existing opportunities. And we are not asking communities to replicate efforts they've done in other contexts. We're asking them to bring them to this table so they can look holistically and develop a strategy for their community. And what we're trying to do as an office is also make sure that they have resources that help them understand what grant opportunities are out there, whether they be federal grants, state grants, local funding opportunities, private sector opportunities, and we are bringing the private sector to them. We have gotten tremendous response from private sector philanthropy and corporate actors that are willing to prioritize these communities in their grant giving as well. So we think in that way we can really accelerate progress that these communities are already making. The grantees, I mean, their submissions to us were really inspiring. There's so much good work happening in all these communities already, and it's our job not to get in the way of that, but to help accelerate that progress and make sure that there's a 360 approach to what's happening in those communities. And holding our own state agencies accountable for these communities, changing the behavior at the Maryland Department of Health, at the Department of Health and Community Service, and saying, how are you meeting these communities and these families and these children where they are at, and doing a better job of meeting their needs.
I really do appreciate that answer. I mean, you have a tremendous charge. I just feel like I'm really close to the issue, right? My kids go to a community school. My husband's the chair of that. It has a child care center in it. It has a hospital right beside it. And I feel like most of the conversations I hear about enough are from so far up about these communities that I'm concerned that maybe people don't know the communities they're trying to change. Another thing to consider is all 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland are required to update their comprehensive plans. They were required to do that by December of last year. So there's another big 10-year roadmap for the development and the future of every jurisdiction that I don't know how that factors into this conversation. So I understand that on one hand, the amount of money that is being recommended to be rescinded seems small, but we're also asking to pause funding as it relates to community schools. And I'm going to keep bringing them together because they're already better known entities on the ground. And I think one of the biggest things locals could get from the state is really just better coordination from state agencies that you mentioned to the local communities that doesn't really require another level of investment from the state, but just better leadership around the coordination of those communications about opportunity. And so I just really think that we have to remember that this was birthed in a different paradigm than we find ourselves in today. And so I just challenge everyone assembled to think about this work in the today.
Absolutely, and incredibly insightful comments. We totally agree. We have been working very hard with our colleagues at the Maryland State Department of Education, AIB, and really across the Children's Cabinet to ensure that we are doing everything we can to ensure the success of the community schools across the state. So through the Children's Cabinet, we have been working to take an all-of-government approach to supporting community schools. Each of the Children's Cabinet agencies have committed to working partnering with community schools to make sure that they are helping community school coordinators in each of these schools be aware of all the resources available to them. So we are launching an initiative around that point. We've also been working with MSDE on ways that we could build the capacity in community schools to do the work that they're already doing, but providing them with stronger technical assistance support. We're working with Towson University on that front, but then also through philanthropic dollars, we've brought the National Communities and Schools Organization to the state to help support community schools across the state. But equally importantly, and I'll ask Pickett to mention this as well, we again see the community schools in the enough jurisdictions as anchor partners for our work. We cannot be successful without them, but also see it as our responsibility to help them do the work that they're already doing and to be successful. We see these two things as very interdependent because community schools need willing, well-resourced, community-based partners to effectively serve the students and their families. And in the enough jurisdictions, we're talking about the neighborhoods with the highest concentrations and longest histories. These are communities that have suffered decades of disinvestment and often discriminatory policymaking. So for the community schools in those communities to be successful, they need the willing partners, and part of our job is to bring those willing partners to their table to help them achieve their goals for the community school. But conversely, enough success depends on the community schools helping us to reach the children and families that we're trying to serve.
And I'll share also in the Enough Act and the statute, one of the eligibility requirements is the school requirement. And so they're linked together there. And we know community schools are hubs of community, and it's where a lot of times families and children find resources. And so within each one of the 27 grantee communities, there's a school at the center of that partnership and relationship. And so it not only helps to drive one of the pillars, which is cradle to career, but it also creates the foundation for connecting to other resources that communities need, that children and families need.
So this is obviously a new program, and when it rolled out, there were promises that it would eliminate childhood poverty, and that's certainly a lofty promise when I think the reality is that to completely eliminate poverty is an impossible task unless you have 100% of the people in a community moving, in the same direction and are all completely bought in, and that's an impossible thing to do, I think, in probably in most cases, if not all cases. Now, moving forward, now we have a benchmark now. We have a starting point because this program just started. Or do we have any metrics or any way to measure the success of this program over time, where it actually truly is reducing poverty? And the reason why I say that, there's a lot of programs that are out there, and when they started to today, there really is not a measurable difference between when these programs started and they really haven't progressed over time as far as any real measurable deliverable results for the community. Given that this just started, is there anything in place where we can actually have something to measure? And that's going to be important to you guys, because then you can go out to the public and say, hey, if we need more money and we're going to ask the taxpayers for more money, these are the results that we've already been able to deliver, and they're tangible results.
Yes, that's a great question. The grants just went out at the beginning of the year, but we are working with our grantees to establish outcome metrics and also performance metrics against those outcome metrics. So obviously our North Star is reducing the number of children living in poverty, but we know what are key indicators that are driving poverty. Things like, are they graduating from high school? Are we reducing chronic absenteeism? Are we increasing the number of employed individuals in the community? So we've given each of these communities a data dashboard that lays out those outcomes and performance measures that flow along how are we supporting children, how are we supporting their families, how are we supporting a safe and thriving community for these children to live in. So we've provided them with a data dashboard based on outcome data that the state collects, that so they could see that wherever possible. We gave them that data at a census tract level. We don't always have it at a census tract level. They, in their applications, gave us the areas that they plan to focus on and which outcomes they would be holding themselves accountable for. Because Enough is working so hard to allow this to be a community-driven project and based on the unique needs of each community, there will be outcome metrics that are different across our communities, but we have a common set of metrics that we'll be looking at across all of the communities, and we'll be asking the communities to report on those things, and we'll be prepared to report them out publicly and to all of you as the program unfolds. We want to be pragmatic, that we're not going to dramatically change poverty rates overnight, but we feel like we have a good sense of what the needles that we need to move in order to get to that objective. And everything we're doing is about supporting community-driven action that is evidence-based. So data is at the core of the actions that we're taking as well. And we're working to support communities and so that they can understand which are the most powerful evidence-based actions that they can take.
How long do you think this program is in place for information is actually meaningful? How many years do you think it would take? Obviously, a couple of years isn't enough time for a program like this to actually be able to deliver the results that we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, and I think after the first year of implementation, we do think we'll be able to show data that measures our impact in these communities. Things like, are we increasing the number of families in the community that have access to childcare, or who in the community schools that we're working with? Have we been able to support reductions in chronic absenteeism? So there will be leading indicator data that we'll be able to present even after a full year of implementation, but it will take some time to be able to get to some of those outcomes.
And if I could just add one thing to Special Secretary Martin's point, I think that example of the data process we went through in the scorecard is actually a perfect example, Chairwoman Smith, to answer your question of like, why this on top of all the other initiatives. We got a lot of feedback from the communities, even during the application process, that the process we were able to go through because of our seat in the governor's office of pulling this statewide data that they rarely have access to and compiling it in one way that showed their neighborhood's unique data was tremendously helpful, because they're doing this work on the ground every day, but nobody is providing that connective tissue to give them the technical assistance and like collective information they need to really move the needle. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback that anyone who actually raised their hand and just said, I want to apply, not even the 27 communities that were ultimately selected, received a customized data dashboard with data specific to their community. And it was a real learning curve for us as a state government to actually think about how do we provide data to the neighborhood level. And people really appreciated it because they want that data, because they want to be data driven and heart led just like we do. So I think that's just also a really great illustrative of a point of like, yes, it is an extra layer, but it's an extra layer that's providing catalytic support to really further the work that's already happening on the ground.
No, okay. Any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.